Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes.
Oh, yeah.
Today,
That's good.
we're taking a deep dive
All right.
into a truly epic novel,
Okay.
Boris Pasternak's Doctor Zhivago.
This book really is an incredible journey. It takes us through Russia's tumultuous early 20th century,
Wow.
alongside our protagonist Yuri Zhivago as he grapples with love loss, art, and revolution.
It sounds heavy,
It is.
but also right up our alley.
Yeah.
What are some of the key themes we should keep in mind as we go through this deep dive?
Well, you hit the nail on the head with those themes.
Okay.
One of the most prominent is this idea of individual lives versus the crushing weight of historical events. Yuri and the other characters are constantly trying to find love, meaning, and even basic survival amidst wars and revolutions.
Talk about high stakes.
Yeah.
Okay, so where does Pasternak drop us into all of this?
Right into the middle of things, actually. The novel opens with a funeral. Not Yuri's, mind you, but his wife's. It's a fascinating way to start, almost like Pasternak is daring us to figure out how we got there.
So he's starting at the end. That's definitely a way to pique a reader's curiosity.
Yeah.
Does the book then jump back to Yuri's childhood?
It does. We learn about his early life marked by the death of his mother and abandonment by his father. You can see how these early experiences shape his worldview and make him sensitive to loss and beauty.
It sounds like his childhood was pretty rough. Did he have anyone to rely on?
He did find solace and guidance in his uncle Nikolai, who instills in him a love of art and literature. This love becomes a recurring theme throughout the book, with Yuri expressing himself through poetry, even at the darkest of times.
Art as a refuge from chaos. I could see how that would be powerful, especially during such a tumultuous period. So does Yuri find love? I know you mentioned his wife's funeral.
He does, and in a way that really explores the complexities of love and relationships. First, there's Tonya, his childhood friend, whom he eventually marries.
Okay.
She represents stability and tradition.
So a safe and steady kind of love. Is that where his heart lies?
Well, that's where things get complicated. Then there's Lara, a woman he meets at a Christmas party.
Okay.
A meeting loaded with symbolism considering it's a time of hope, but set against the backdrop of growing social unrest. Their connection is instant and profound, but their paths keep diverging.
Okay, so we've got this love triangle brewing.
Yeah.
But I remember you mentioned revolution. How does that start to impact Yuri and the others?
Think of it like this. The atmosphere in pre-revolutionary Russia is incredibly tense.
Okay.
There's a sense of impending change, a simmering discontent that Pasternak captures beautifully in scenes like the workers' strike and its violent suppression.
So the revolution isn't just some abstract historical event. It's something that's directly impacting the characters' lives.
Yes.
Their sense of safety and their futures.
Exactly. And this is where we start to see the moral ambiguity of the time play out. Characters like Komrovsky, the manipulative lawyer, represent the corruption of the old order, but also take advantage of the chaos of the revolution.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster, especially with the love triangle already in motion. Do Yuri and Lara's paths ever truly converge?
Their destinies are definitely intertwined from the start,
Okay.
but it's a long and winding road. Lara ends up marrying Pasha Antipov, a fiery, revolutionary idealist. So you have these contrasting relationships, Yuri and Tonya bound by duty and familial ties versus Yuri and Lara drawn together by a deeper, more passionate connection.
Okay.
It's this tension that drives much of the narrative.
Wow. Okay, so we've got forbidden love, simmering revolution, and morally ambiguous characters. Where do we even go from here? World War I, maybe?
You got it. The outbreak of World War I becomes a turning point for all the characters, especially Yuri. As a doctor, he experiences the war's brutality firsthand, and it deeply impacts his worldview.
Speaking of powerful passages, I remember one where Lara describes the war as this destructive force, like it's poisoned their generation's hopes and dreams. Does that sound familiar?
Absolutely. It's a truly poignant moment where you see the war's impact, not just on the physical landscape, but on the characters' souls. It's like Pasternak is saying that war doesn't just destroy lives, it destroys spirits.
So if World War I is a turning point, I can only imagine what the Russian Revolution does to these characters' lives.
Get ready, because it completely upends everything. Imagine the chaos and upheaval of a society being torn apart and rebuilt. Yuri and his family are forced to flee to the Ural Mountains seeking refuge. But even there, they can't escape the revolution's long reach.
So even trying to escape the revolution, they're still swept up in it? It sounds like there's no safe haven for them.
That's one way to put it. And their encounter with Liberius, the partisan leader, really throws a wrench into things. He represents the complexities of the revolution and the moral dilemmas it creates. There are no easy answers, no clear-cut good guys and bad guys.
So what about Lara? Where does she fit into all this chaos? I can't imagine their paths having crossed again.
Oh, they do. After a long separation, their paths converge once more in Yuriatin. Yuri frantically searches for her, driven by this desperate longing. And their reunion at Varikino, a rural estate, is a brief moment of happiness amidst all the turmoil.
It sounds like a breath of fresh air, but knowing this book, it can't last forever.
Right.
What throws a wrench into their happiness this time?
Well, it's never just one thing, is it? The war continues to loom over their lives. And then there's the arrival of Pasha, now transformed into the formidable revolutionary figure known as Strelnikov.
Okay.
This adds a whole new layer of complexity to their already complicated relationship.
It sounds like their happiness is always just out of reach, constantly being disrupted by forces beyond their control. How does Yuri deal with all this?
The revolution takes a toll on him. He becomes disillusioned with the brutality and the compromises it demands. He struggles with his writing, his sense of purpose, and ultimately his mental state deteriorates.
So even though he finds Lara, he's still lost in a way. This must be devastating for both of them.
It is. Lara nurses him back to health, showing her incredible strength and compassion. But eventually she leaves with her daughter, adding another layer of heartbreak to Yuri's already heavy load.
Wow, this is truly tragic. It seems like every time Yuri gets a glimmer of hope, it's snatched away.
Yeah.
Where does this leave him?
This separation sends Yuri spiraling into despair. He's consumed by grief and loss, and you can really feel the tragedy closing in. It's a poignant reminder of the human cost of these grand historical events.
This deep dive is definitely living up to its name. We've only just scratched the surface of this story, and I'm already hooked.
Me too. And there's so much more to unpack, especially in terms of the novel's deeper meanings and Pasternak's powerful writing style.
Well, you've definitely left us on a cliffhanger. For our listeners, I think we all need a moment to process all this before we dive into part 2.
Picking up where we left off, I think it's fascinating how Pasternak doesn't shy away from portraying the revolution's impact on everyday life. We're not just dealing with grand historical events. We're seeing how those events filter down and affect ordinary people like Yuri and his loved ones.
Yeah, that's so true. It's easy to get lost in the sweeping narrative of revolution and war. But Pasternak really brings it down to a personal level.
Yeah.
Do you have any examples that really stood out to you?
There's a scene where Yuri and Tonya are talking about something as simple as getting potatoes. It really highlights how the revolution has transformed even the most basic necessities into a struggle. Rationing, exhaustion, fear of epidemics. These are the daily realities they're facing.
You're right. It's those small details that make the story feel so real and relatable, even though it's set against such a monumental backdrop. Does Pasternak only show the revolution's negative effects, or does he explore any positive aspects?
He definitely doesn't shy away from the darker side, like the violence, the hunger, the political maneuvering. But he also shows how people find ways to adapt, how they create moments of joy and connection amidst the hardship.
That sounds like the human spirit shining through even in the darkest of times. Is there a particular scene that captures that resilience for you?
There's one where Yuri attends a house committee meeting. It's chaotic and almost absurd, with people arguing over who gets evicted and who gets to stay. But beneath the surface, you see a community trying to create order and fairness in a very difficult situation.
Right? It's like they're trying to rebuild their world even as it's crumbling around them. Does this give Yuri any sense of hope for his own situation, especially after Lara leaves?
Well, remember, he's still consumed with finding her and reuniting with his family. There's this pivotal scene where he encounters a seamstress who claims to have information about them. It's such an emotionally charged moment because Yuri is desperate for any news, but the seamstress is cryptic, offering more questions than answers.
That sounds incredibly frustrating for him, like a cruel tease of hope. What is Pasternak trying to achieve with this scene?
It's a brilliant example of dramatic irony. We as readers know more than Yuri does at this point, and it creates this incredible tension. Pasternak uses this technique to highlight the theme of separation and loss that permeates the entire novel.
It's like he's emphasizing how much Yuri has sacrificed for his love for Lara, his family, his career, his home. It makes you wonder, was it all worth it?
That's the question Pasternak wants us to wrestle with. Can love truly flourish amidst such chaos and upheaval? He doesn't offer easy answers, leaving it open for interpretation.
Okay, so Yuri is still searching, still yearning for Lara. What happens next in his journey?
He embarks on a journey to Varikino, and this whole sequence has this dreamlike, almost hallucinatory quality. He's exhausted physically and emotionally, and the lines between reality and imagination begin to blur.
So even the journey itself becomes a reflection of his inner turmoil. Does he encounter anyone along the way?
He does, and they're all very interesting characters. There's a barber who shares stories of his family's past, an innkeeper who spouts philosophical musings. These encounters add to the surreal and almost allegorical nature of Yuri's pilgrimage.
It sounds like he's traveling through a landscape that's both familiar and strange, mirroring his own state of mind. Does he ever reach Varykino?
He does, but it's bittersweet. He finds a note from Lara, but the house is empty, filled with ghosts of their past happiness. It's a poignant moment full of longing and regret.
Another punch to the gut for poor Yuri. It seems like happiness is always just out of grasp. Does he at least find some solace in his surroundings?
The house itself becomes a symbol in the story. It represents their love, its fragility, their longing for a peaceful life that's always being disrupted. And you can see Pasternak's skill as a writer shining through here. He was writing under Soviet censorship, so he couldn't be too explicit in his critiques. But he uses symbolism and subtle imagery to convey deeper meanings.
That's fascinating, like he's embedding hidden messages within the text. What are some examples of this symbolism?
Think about the natural world, the snow, the wind, the changing seasons. They all seem to mirror the characters' emotional states and the upheaval of the era.
That's a great observation.
Mm.
So even the landscape becomes a character in its own right. But I have to ask, does Lara ever return to Varykino?
She does. It's like a miracle, a brief respite from the storm. But of course, it can't be that simple. The reunion is joyful but tinged with sadness. The war is still raging, and they both carry the scars of their past experiences.
It's like they're trying to cling to a moment of happiness while the world is falling apart around them. Are there any other external threats to their fragile peace?
Enter Strelnikov, Lara's revolutionary husband. He becomes this larger-than-life figure, almost symbolic of the revolution's ruthlessness. His presence adds another layer of tension and complexity to their already complicated situation.
I can only imagine the drama unfolding. Despite all this turmoil, does Yuri find any creative outlets during their time at Varykino?
He does. In fact, he rediscovers his passion for writing, pouring his heart and soul into his work. There's this incredible passage where he describes his personal philosophy of art, and it directly contrasts with the prevailing dogma of the time. He rejects the idea that art should serve a political purpose. For Yuri, art is about truth, beauty, and individual expression.
It's like he's rebelling against the constraints of the revolution, finding freedom within his own creative world.
Exactly. It's a powerful testament to the enduring power of art and its ability to provide solace and meaning even in the darkest of times.
But knowing their luck, this idyllic period can't last forever. What happens to disrupt their newfound peace?
Sadly, you're right. The revolution catches up to them, once again forcing them to flee Varykino. Their separation this time is even more heartbreaking because it feels like fate is working against them, like they're trapped in a cycle of loss and longing.
It's as if history itself is conspiring to keep them apart. So where does this final separation leave Yuri?
We jump ahead to his later years in Moscow. He's trying to rebuild his life, but he's haunted by Lara's memory. It's a truly poignant portrayal of loss and regret. He's lost his family, his love, his sense of purpose. He's a shadow of his former self.
It sounds like he's living a half-life, unable to move on from the past. Are there any glimmers of hope in this bleak period?
There's this incredible scene where he has a chance encounter with a woman dressed in lilac. It's a moment of pure serendipity in a crowded street where time seems to stand still. It's like Pasternak is reminding us that even in the midst of chaos, beauty and connection can still exist.
It's like a fleeting reminder of what he's lost with Lara. Does this encounter lead to anything?
Sadly, no. It's more of a bittersweet reminder of the fleeting nature of happiness and the paths not taken. And it foreshadows Yuri's eventual fate.
Oh no, I have a bad feeling about this. What happens to Yuri?
His death is both tragic and strangely fitting. He dies on a Moscow street, just another anonymous victim of the era's hardships. It's a stark reminder that even great men are not immune to the forces of history.
It's heartbreaking that after all he's endured, he ends up just another statistic. But is there any sense of peace or redemption in his death?
There's a beautiful image of his spirit soaring above the city, finally reunited with Lara in the afterlife. It's a hopeful end to a story filled with so much pain and loss.
So they find peace together at last. Does the story end there, or does Pasternak offer any other perspectives?
We then shift to Lara's perspective. It's important to remember that every character has their own unique journey, their own struggles and triumphs. Lara's story is just as compelling as Yuri's.
I'm glad Pasternak gives her a voice.
Yeah.
What do we learn about Lara's experiences?
We see her incredible strength and resilience, especially as a mother. But we also see how the revolution has taken a toll on her, forcing her to make impossible choices.
It sounds like she's had to make incredible sacrifices just to survive.
Mhm.
How does she react to Yuri's death?
There's a heart-wrenching scene at Yuri's funeral where her grief is raw and honest. It's a powerful moment of catharsis. a release of all the pain and sorrow she's been carrying for so long.
It sounds like a fitting tribute to their love story. Does this scene bring any closure to their complicated relationship?
In a way, yes. Her eulogy is almost like a love letter to Yuri, a final farewell. It speaks to the enduring power of their connection, even in death. And it brings us back to the novel's central theme, the idea that even in the most turbulent of times, the human spirit can find moments of beauty, connection, and meaning.
It's a powerful reminder that love can transcend even the most difficult circumstances. But what happens to Laura after Yuri's death?
In a surprising twist, we learn that she disappears, leaving behind another mystery. It leaves the reader wondering what choices she made and what fate ultimately befell her.
So even in death, their story isn't completely over. It's like Pasternak is saying that some mysteries are never fully resolved. Does this bring us to the end of the novel?
Not quite. We shift to the present day with Yuri's half-brother Evgraf searching for answers about their lives. He represents a link between the past and present, trying to piece together the fragments of their story.
It sounds like he's on a mission to preserve their memory and understand their legacy. Is he successful in his search?
He's like a literary detective, unearthing clues and piecing together their lives. And through his efforts, we get a glimpse of the novel's lasting impact. It's a reminder that even though the revolution has ended, their story continues to resonate, inspiring and challenging readers generations later.
So even though Yuri and Lara are gone, their love and their struggles continue to have meaning. Does Evgraf ever find definitive answers about their lives?
He has a fascinating encounter with two of Yuri's old friends, Dudarov and Gordon. They share their memories, offering different perspectives on Yuri's life and work. It's like we're getting a multifaceted portrait of him, seeing him through the eyes of those who knew him best.
It sounds like their memories help to fill in some of the gaps, but also highlight how differently people experience and interpret history. Are their accounts consistent with each other?
There are some discrepancies, which is to be expected. It reinforces the idea that there's no single objective truth when it comes to history. Each individual has their own unique perspective.
That's a really important point. It's a reminder to consider multiple viewpoints and to acknowledge the complexities of the past. What other insights do Dudarov and Gordon offer?
Dudarov talks about Christina, a woman he loved and lost during the war. He describes her heroic death and the monument being built in her honor. It's a reminder of the countless lives lost and forever altered by those tumultuous events.
It's like their stories are a microcosm of the larger historical narrative, highlighting the personal sacrifices and the lasting impact of the revolution and the war. What about Gordon's story? What does he share?
His story is equally compelling, but much darker. He talks about his experiences in the Gulag, the horrors he witnessed, and how he was forced to betray his own values to survive. It's a chilling reminder of the darker side of the Soviet regime and the way it silenced dissent.
So while Dudarov focuses on the heroic sacrifices, Gordon offers a more sobering perspective on the revolution's consequences.
Exactly. And their conversation highlights the different ways people cope with trauma. Dudarov chooses to idealize the past, while Gordon is more cynical, more aware of the cost of that idealism. It adds another layer of complexity to the novel's exploration of history and memory.
It's fascinating how these two seemingly opposite perspectives can coexist within the same narrative. What happens after Evgraf's encounter with Yuri's friends?
The final scene takes us to the ruins of a bombed-out city where Evgraf and his friend are walking. It's a powerful image of destruction and renewal, reminding us that even in the face of war and devastation, life goes on. People rebuild, they cope, they create new meaning from the ashes of the old.
It's a hopeful image, suggesting that even after the most devastating events, there's always a chance for rebirth. Do they encounter anyone else in this final scene?
They come across a group of workers clearing debris and rebuilding homes. It's a powerful symbol of hope, of the human spirit's ability to overcome even the most daunting challenges.
It's a beautiful image to end on, one that suggests that even amidst the ruins, there's always the potential for growth and renewal. Seems like Doctor Zhivago is more than just a love story. It's a story about the resilience of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming adversity.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's a story that stays with you long after you finish reading it. And I think it's a book that deserves to be reread and rediscovered, because each time you come back to it, you'll find new layers of meaning, new insights into the human condition.
I couldn't agree more. It sounds like we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have, but there's still more to explore. In the final part of our deep dive, I'd like to talk about Pasternak's unique writing style and the symbolism he uses to convey his message.
That sounds fascinating. I'm looking forward to delving even deeper into the literary aspects of this masterpiece. For our listeners, get ready for a deep dive into Pasternak's prose in Part 3. Okay, so we've journeyed through love, loss, revolution, and resilience with Yuri and Lara. What I find truly amazing is how Pasternak weaves all these elements together with such powerful language.
He really is a master of his craft. One thing that stands out is the structure of the novel itself. It's unconventional, starting with that funeral and then jumping back and forth in time.
That's right. You never quite know what to expect next. It keeps you on your toes as a reader. Why do you think Pasternak chose this approach?
I think that fragmented structure mirrors the chaos and uncertainty of the era. It's like he's saying that life itself is messy, unpredictable, full of unexpected twists and turns.
So the form of the novel reflects the content. That's a really interesting connection, and it definitely makes sense considering Yuri's life. He's constantly being pulled in different directions by love, duty, and political upheaval.
Exactly. That tension between personal desire and the overwhelming forces of history is a major theme. Yuri's always trying to find his place in a world that's constantly shifting beneath his feet.
And then there's those incredible poems that are woven into the narrative. It's like they offer a glimpse into Yuri's soul, allowing us to understand his deepest thoughts and feelings.
They add this whole other layer of meaning to the story. Sometimes they reflect the events directly, while other times they offer more symbolic or metaphorical interpretation.
I love how they provide these moments of reflection and beauty, even amidst all the darkness and turmoil.
And you can't talk about the poems without acknowledging Pasternak's skill as a poet. His language is so rich and evocative, filled with vivid imagery and layers of symbolism.
Okay, so we've discussed the themes, the characters, the structure, the poetry. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
What would you say is Pasternak's overall message in Doctor Zhivago? What's the takeaway for us as readers?
For me, one of the key takeaways is the importance of individual human experience, even in the face of overwhelming historical events. Yuri and Lara's love story is a testament to the enduring power of human connection amidst chaos and suffering.
It's like their love becomes a beacon of hope in a world that's falling apart. Does Pasternak offer any solutions or answers to the problems they face?
Not necessarily, but he reminds us that even in the darkest of times, there's still beauty to be found, still hope to hold on to, and that even though history might try to crush us, the human spirit can endure.
It's a very human story, even though it's set against this epic backdrop of historical events.
Why do you think this book continues to resonate with readers today, decades after it was written?
I think we can all relate to the themes of love loss and the search for meaning. These are timeless human experiences, and Pasternak explores them with such depth and sensitivity, drawing us into the characters' lives and making us care about their fates.
It's also a reminder that history isn't just about dates and facts, but about the lived experiences of real people and how those experiences shape who they become. Exactly. And Dr. Zhivago gives us a glimpse into the human cost of revolution, the way it upends lives and forces people to make impossible choices.
I think our deep dive has shown that Doctor Zhivago is a powerful and thought-provoking novel, one that stays with you long after you finish reading it.
I wholeheartedly agree. It's a book that deserves to be reread, rediscovered. Each time you come back to it, you'll find new layers of meaning, new insights into the human condition.
Well said. I know I'll be thinking about Yuri and Lara's story for a long time to come. For our listeners, we hope this deep dive has given you a new appreciation for Dr. Zhivago, not just as a love story, but as a timeless exploration of the human spirit's ability to persevere in the face of adversity. What are your lasting impressions of this epic tale? What resonated with you the most? Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those pages turning.